if I can save a brother, if we can save a nephew, niece, cousin, daughter, mother, sister, brother, I mean, every bit of this is worth it.
North Star isn't simply not suffering. It should be about recovery and thriving.
I so appreciate the consistency of what you've built. It has this sense of family. I am so fangirling over Mark and Ken right now. Like, I'm so fangirling. Welcome back to the Impact Lounge and to our new series from SixDegrees.org, Mental Health Conversations That Connect Us. I'm your host, Stacey Houston, and we're thrilled to launch this new series as part of our national I Get It campaign. This movement is designed to highlight how vast the mental health sector truly is, to normalize conversations around mental health, and to give people real tools to support one another. Every Wednesday in May, we'll bring you honest, inspiring conversations with leaders from music, mental health, community care, and lived experience. Because here's what we know: healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in relationship. So grab a coffee, settle in, and welcome to today's conversation. Today's episode is called Creative Minds Carrying Spaces. We're exploring how creativity, performance, and belonging can be powerful entry tools to emotional healing. We're joined by three incredible leaders who have created spaces where people feel deeply seen and supported. And together, we're going to explore how creativity connects us, how stigma is being dismantled in surprising places, and what it really means to say, I get it. So first up, Beth Barcus from Porter's Call out of Franklin, Tennessee, where artists and their families receive confidential care for the heart and soul that's really behind the music. Welcome to the show, Beth.
Thank you, Stacey.
Next is Mark Reilly, founder of the Washington Tattoo here in the Washington, D.C. area. He's a global advocate for veterans and performers who use rhythm as a path to resilience. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Stacey. Honored to be here.
And last but not least, Ken Zimmerman, CEO of Fountain House, a national nonprofit based in New York, whose innovative clubhouse model builds community for people living with serious mental illness. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's just really jump into the heart of your work, creativity and connection. Each of you is really rooted in a space where imagination meets healing. So tell us, how does creativity and connection serve as a gateway for emotional healing in your community or your profession? I'd love to start with Beth, because I can imagine you often see creativity collide with vulnerability. So how do you see healing through these conversations really beginning?
Yeah. So, as someone that's worked in this space at Porter's Call, which is basically the hub is in Nashville, Tennessee, but we see people all over the country through virtual sessions, or sometimes if they're coming through town, we get to see them in person. And I've had the great privilege of sitting with artists and their partners. And recording and touring artists have a unique challenge, and that is they are often vulnerable through their music, right? They use creativity as both an outlet and also something that therapeutically feeds them. And so when that happens is they get to do this career that then becomes a commodity, and it's a product to now market. So there's this real clash between this has been my therapeutic outlet. This has been something that has fueled my soul, and now I have my vulnerable art out into the world to be kind of judged a little bit. And so I see a lot of artists that we meet with that are a little bit struggling with how does my creativity really it kind of isolates me in some ways. And so what we try to do is reframe it for them and help them to still be able to use their creativity in such a way that not just connects the listener, but also connects them to who they really are. So we see over and over and over that music is a connector. People go to concerts together. People go, "Oh my gosh, you got to listen to this song. This has really been powerful for me." It really is something that unites soul to soul. So we want that to continue to go on, right? We can't imagine a world without music. And so what better way than to care for the heart and soul behind that music and help them to both enjoy the music for themselves, but also to know that they're creating something in the world that connects people.
I love that, Beth. That's so beautiful the way you describe it, and it's a perfect segue to Mark. And I will say that when I heard the name Washington Tattoo, I'm like, "Oh, that's a tattoo shop, military. That makes sense, right?" My uncles had sleeves from Vietnam and all that, so I was way off. And so maybe start with telling people what the tattoo really is. And then my question to you is really that rhythm and music is often seen as a release, like Beth has shared so beautifully. And I'd love to hear your take on its healing power in your specific sector of this industry.
Absolutely. So the Washington tattoo, we honor the fallen and we uplift the living. And the biggest thing that we have that we is a conversation point is the term tattoo. And so it's actually an anglicized term for do dun tap toe, which is the old Dutch military call that would be played around 18th, 17th, and 16th century soldiers to tell the tavern keepers to literally turn off the beer taps and send the soldiers back to bed before Reveille the next morning. So back in the olden days, soldiers were not equipped or rich enough to have their own watches. So the drum, the fife, the bagpipe were all communication tools that shared how soldiers were to move across the day. Reveille, church call, mess call, tattoo was the final call of the evening, and that brought everyone back to bed. Fast forward after World War II, the town of Edinburgh, Scotland, has the largest of these military ceremonies that happen at night. So the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo is in front of the Edinburgh Castle. It's 26 nights of shows in front of 10,000 people per show. So they roughly hit about 250,000 people per event. But what they do is they bring in cultural diplomacy groups from all over the world. So marching bands, drill teams, dance troops that share really the cultural assets of each nation's military. So the Washington Tattoo has partnered with the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo in bringing one of these to Washington, D.C. So we're a young but budding organization, started in 2019. But what we started to learn is that every one of our events that we would do, there would be veterans and family members who would come up to us and share these horrific stories of deployment, divorce, transition, suicidal ideation. And we would ask them, why do you feel comfortable to bring this up to us now? And they would always come back to how music really got to their roots and their identity. And so when we look at military and family member and veteran suicide, it comes to a loss of typically three things. One is identity, one is community, and one is sense of purpose. So by digging into where we all come from in our military backgrounds, going to basic training, music has always been that connector, just like Beth said, that you build this community around music and service. And that's something you should never lose. But unfortunately, in our veteran community, when you take that uniform off, it really does put a lot of folks in a tailspin, and music can bring them back as a connecting force for hope and good and purpose.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's like an incredible history lesson there, and really brings that alive to us that have not been as close to the military. And so, thank you for sharing. And then, Ken, this clubhouse model with Fountain House is highly tactical, but I think that even by its very nature, it's creative. And so I would love for you to share a little bit how that translates to emotional resilience amongst those that you serve.
Well, thank you. And first of all, Mark and Beth, it's so inspiring to hear your work and so appreciative for it. And I should say I'm a recovering lawyer, so being on a something that talks about creativity makes me particularly proud. So thank you, Stacy, for that as well.
Of course.
But Fountain House actually starts with a premise. The people with serious mental illness have all the creativities that all the rest of us do. And as a result, the origin story is important. 75 years ago, 6 former psychiatric patients from Rockland State Hospital started meeting on the steps of the New York Public Library saying that was the most traumatic thing that ever happened to us. What we really needed was each other. They befriended somebody who bought them a chunk of 47th Street and Hell's Kitchen when Hell's Kitchen was still Hell's Kitchen, and over decades developed what's now known as the Clubhouse model. And it starts from the simplest of insights. Community is a therapeutic intervention, right? We all know we need people, place, and purpose. We all know that belonging, whether you have a serious mental illness or not, is pivotal to recovery and thriving. And so over the course of decades, developed what is actually an intentional community made up of the people with the most serious mental illnesses, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. In New York City, we have 2,000 members, and that is the term we use because it is a voluntary community in which everybody participates. And the center is we start with the assets that everybody has. Everything is co-led by the members of the community. And as a result, for purposes of today's conversation, the essence of creativity emerges when we're in relationship with one another. And that is just as true as when people with serious mental illness are in relationship with me or anybody else. And we have the evidence base. We reduce Medicaid costs 21%, double the rates of employment, advance education. But what's more true is that it is the relationship between people and the listening to ideas that emerge. So, for example, we have an art gallery on Ninth Avenue that is an absolutely compelling piece of art that most people would not actually lead with. And yet, one of the great privileges I have in being the CEO in the 2.5 years I've been there is that I actually get art from our members to hang in my office. And I think about this because I've been fortunate in other parts of my career when I've served in government at various levels and I've been able to get art from the National Gallery or something. I'm actually of the belief that the art that I have here is more powerful and compelling because of the connection between the people who provide it and the community that we create. So that is at the heart. I should say there are over 200 clubhouses around the country, an additional 100 plus around the world. And the essence of what I am there to do is to say, as opposed to being on the fringes of the ways in which we provide support and treatment to people with serious mental illness, this should be a core part of the infrastructure in the same way that medication and talk therapy is.
Ken, that's so deeply inspiring. I think that some of the things that stand out with what you just shared, and it's clear with Beth and Mark as well, is that there's real dignity and empowerment, that you're not telling someone what their journey is going to be, but you are walking alongside them in it and you're giving them the tools to be um, actively not just involved, but creators in what comes next. And that is such a beautiful way to lead. And I think we obviously, as much as we would love to not have to talk about stigma when it comes to mental health, it's a reality that continues to linger. And so even today, when we're talking about mental health, it's still difficult, on stage or in service, or even when we're talking about within care systems of support. So I really want to ask each of you, this next question about what you've observed around mental health stigma in your specific area and how you're individually kind of working to dismantle it. And since we just left with Ken, I'd love to kick this to you first. You've worked in both policy, like you just mentioned, and grassroots spaces. So how does stigma show up differently in each of those?
Oh, it obviously is a key concern. And I just want to start off by saying it stands in the way of recovery. I think all three of us start with the premise not only on dignity, but that our challenge when we think about mental health is that we don't actually prioritize what the North Star should be. The North Star isn't simply not suffering, it should be about recovery and thriving. And if we change the North Star toward that as the aspiration all of us have, and simply the fact that someone has a mental health condition or is suffering from mental health should actually not change what we're after. And I think the soft bigotry of low expectations that emerges when that is all that is aimed for is at the root of stigma and actually is at the root of why we need to eliminate it. I'll start by saying I do think it's significant that stigma has been reduced. I do think that, as always, youth lead the way in making change in our society and their willingness to talk about mental health in a very different way than prior generations make a difference. I think the celebrities that are talking about their own experience make a huge difference. That said, I will say that for me, in the privileged position I'm of being, with 350 to 400 people with serious mental illness on a daily basis and co-creating with them is the single best voice are actually people with serious mental illness themselves. And so everything I do, from whether it's being on Capitol Hill to, being on the news, is usually with a member of Fountain House, because for however articulate or capable I am, what people remember is the change in perception when somebody with a serious mental illness actually is the one that they hear speaking. Last quick story, and then I'll let you go on. So Governor Hochul came to Fountain House on our headquarters on 47th Street, took a tour. I spent some time with her. But the idea that when she walked in, what she saw was a place of inspiration, positivity, and light, from the way in which the building is designed to the way in which the piano that somebody is playing leads to a sense of the place, meant that when she actually spoke to the community, she tore up her notes and talked about love and community as being what she observed, as opposed to something that is a treatment center. We're not a treatment center, we're a voluntary community, but nonetheless, the significance of the way that that stigma is actually furthered by what it is we say people need, regardless of whether they have a mental health condition or not, I think is the great thing that we are tackling. And it sounds like all three of us are doing it in our respective ways.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Mark, in the military and performance world, I think that, there's this other, I wouldn't say stigma, but this long held belief, I think that it leads to strength, right? Strength is important. Strength is everything. So I'd love for you to unpack maybe the cultural impact of mental health conversations in the military.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've worn multiple hats throughout my career. So I first joined the Army as a drummer. So I was a percussionist with one of the premier bands in DC. So I was with the Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps, so doing White House arrivals, presidential inaugurations. If you saw people look like George Washington in front of the White House, I was one of them. But we would do these outreach missions all the time to Walter Reed. We'd go to San Antonio, we'd go to Brooke Army Medical Center, we'd go to the Burn Center, and you would interface with kids that were 19 years old, hit with an IED in Afghanistan or Iraq, and they would never live a normal day ever in their life again. And you would see the power of music just give them increased quality of life just in that moment. You could see the fire come back in their eyes. And that became addictive. So for 15 years, I was a drummer. The last 5 years is promoted out of that, did some policy writing for Army music. And we were tackling the secondary mission of Army music. And we went into the mental health space. We built a white paper. It's still getting kicked around the Pentagon. But that fueled this passion of trying to get to the core of what is the stigma and what are remedies about the stigma we could tackle. So we partnered with the Washington Tattoo, with the Syracuse University Institute for Veteran and Military Families, the IVMF, as well as George Mason University. And we found a few studies that actually showed anywhere between 82 and 90% of veterans will not seek traditional therapy. So anything with the word therapy in it, they don't want to touch it. I also know several folks. I run a Sergeant Major E9 networking breakfast here in the DC area. And I've had folks come to me that were senior enlisted folks that they did seek that therapy, and it still came back to bite them for promotion, career advancement. And so it's a real tough nut to crack, the idea of stigma. It's something I think we're definitely always going to be battling. But at the end of the day, I think, Ken hit it. The North Star is, for us, it's quality of life and being able to say, do you have respect and dignity as you grow older? Because when you're in the veteran space, you're dealing with a multi-generational audience, and music impacts the Vietnam veteran in a very different way than your post-surge veteran with Iraq and Afghanistan to, a new veteran to today. So when we look at the stigma, it almost is that each generation is struggling with their own version of it because they were trained, go blow things up, kill people, and then that's part of their hardened story. And when they become a family member or they want to, grow in their own personal journey, they have to go through a metamorphosis. And so music has been a great tool to be able to do that.
Thank you, Mark. Well said. And Beth, you know, Obviously, it's no surprise. I run SixDegrees.org, which is founded by Kevin Bacon. So I've seen artists and entertainers up close, and it feels like they are expected to be perfect in many ways, and that's kind of a high pressure system that's in place. I'd love to hear a little bit how you unpack the stigma around many of them needing support. I shouldn't say many of them, but those that are coming to seek help, because it feels like, yeah, we see in the headlines this person, that person that voluntarily share their story, but I'm sure that means there's 10 more that are not talking about it. So, how do you kind of begin that relationship and help them to see that it's okay to reach out and get support?
Yeah. Well, Porter's Call started in 2001. So imagine the conversation around mental health. At that time, the stigma was pretty high. And, the population that we serve, I mean, they basically, the way I often describe it is they're on a platform and it's a high pedestal platform, right? And they live in a glass bowl. I mean, or a glass house, whatever you want to call it. They live such an exposed life, both on stage as well as now social media, and it just continues to increase their exposure. And that presents a unique challenge to being able to live authentically. We often say you've got this persona of what you present on stage or to the public because you're a performer. You kind of are an actor, right? But at the same time, you're vulnerable through your music and it represents parts of your authentic self. So how do we merge those two worlds and integrate them in such a way that you show up authentically on the stage and yet the fans get to really see and hear you, right? And so that is something that has been a bit of a uphill battle for 24 years. But I also feel like COVID broke it wide open because all of those artists came off the stage. They all were off the road for many of them, a solid year and a half. The mental health struggles became at an all-time high. It's been shown that musicians and artists before COVID, there was surveys done that they're twice as more likely to suffer from addiction issues and other mental health struggles than the average population. And it's also been shown that 75% of artists that had been surveyed struggle with relational conflict and struggle, community isolation, and other mental health struggles. So those are really compelling numbers to show that we have a mental health crisis throughout our world, but very uniquely showing up in the music industry space. And so one of the main ways in which we seek to break down those barriers and try to dismantle the stigma is we encourage them to not only come and find a confidential safe space at a place like Porter's Call. We take away the barriers and make it more accessible. All of our services are completely free. So not only do we see people one-on-one for sessions, we see them as a couple. If they're in a relationship, we can see them as a band. We often place them in groups, these affinity groups where they're with people similar to them. Like one group in particular that I run once a month is these are women who are married to male artists, but yet they also work in the industry on the business executive side. So imagine how the hard space that is for them to be honest about their struggles working in the industry and their spouses or partners struggle within, their career. And which hat do I wear? If I'm talking to my husband or talking to my partner, if they come in and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling with this," it's like, "Okay, do you want me to wear my friend hat, my spouse hat, my partner hat, my industry hat? Which hat do I wear?" And so having an affinity group where these individuals can come in and just say, "Oh, this just happened today," and it's confidential, then they all are like, "I get it. I don't I mean, that was actually not you didn't prime me for that, but truly, we say it all the time. They go, "I get it. You don't even have to explain. You don't have to give me backstory. You don't have to qualify anything. I get it." And so that starts to break down the stigma when they step into a room and they feel seen, they know they belong, they know it's confidential. And so, whatever space that an artist or their partner shows up in, whether it's one on one, couples, band sessions, group sessions, we do retreats, we do intensives, we do adventures, we do workshops. We often call those workshops prehab. And so, the more accessibility that we can give people to get the care where they can sit in a room and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. Everybody else in this room gets it." And my porter, they get it because I'm personally have probably spent about 20,000 hours with artists and their partners. So even though I've never been on a stage in the glass house or glass bowl elevated with a platform, I get it because I hear the same themes over and over. And so to me, what I have seen is the artists that uses their platform with great purpose, they are the number one way for us that we see that the stigma is being dismantled. They wear it like a badge of honor and they kind of parade it like a trophy. So when someone says it from the stage, the audience is like, "Oh, if so and so can go and get that care, I need to do that too." And so it really creates this ripple effect that we're so happy to see that more and more people are reaching out for care. So that I feel like people using their platform and say, "Here's my mental health journey. Here's the ways in which I have been able to receive healing for not just my mental state, but my emotional, my social, relational, and physical, ways, because we're more than just mental, we're more than physical." When artists are outspoken about that, it just I can see all the shame start to just kind of trickle away.
Absolutely. And I mean, something that is a theme throughout is this sense of community. And when people see themselves and others, there's a safer space to say, "Oh, I can talk to this person about it." Even if, Beth, you don't share the experience you've created, right? Your organization's created a space where there's others that they can look left and right and say, "Oh man, I can relate. I can see that." Um, this leads us into really the next part, which is around belonging and inclusion. And I think that so many people today feel unseen, like they don't really belong anywhere. And we hear that often, especially in our young people. And each of these spaces that have been created by your organizations are really honing in on that foster of belonging and that sense of there's a place for you here. Um, so I'd love to continue with Beth on this one because you kind of already touched on it, but what happens when someone um, is known as not just an artist but as a whole person, right? I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, whenever I saw that question about belonging and just hearing that, the irony is that one of our pillars at Porter's Call that really holds up the roof of our mission is belonging. We were founded, like I said, almost 25 years ago, and I'll kind of give a quick backstory because I loved hearing Mark and Ken talk about their origins, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so powerful. So really the way we even get our name was from, the early Benedictine monasteries. We kinda modeled this community and this care, and that is that when a sojourner, a traveler was weary, they would stop off at the monastery, and they would know that a lay person, not a monk, but a lay person, would be at the gates, and they would have a door that someone could knock on to find rest and unburden. And so the porter's job was to practice hospitality, to offer care, to get them to what they need, and to make sure that when they leave better than when they entered. And so belonging and care and generosity are the pillars in which we build Porter's Call and our mission, and really model it after that style of this is a relationship freely given without exchange of transaction. And that's super important for the artistic community because a lot of the people we see, a lot of the artists we see would not be able to afford the traditional therapy, which is why we're a nonprofit. And we raise money to make sure that the artists have and their partners have no barrier to accessibility. But I love the model of being able to basically freely give friendship and relationship, as well as more of a very skilled, excellent care. And so this belonging piece is really at the core of what we do, because if people don't feel like they belong, then they don't feel seen, they don't feel safe. And so, if we can cultivate safety and we can communicate to them, we see you, no judgment. Um, we get you. We are going to come alongside you. This is not, I'm a clinician, you're a client, you're not well, I'm well. Just the way Ken described what they do is just this side by side. Like we all have something to offer and we all have ways in which we can grow. And so when we practice that level of empathy, then belonging is cultivated. I don't think it's something you can say, "You belong, and we're gonna offer you belonging." They have to decide if they feel like they belong, and it's our job to be that safe place to cultivate that space for them.
Well said, Beth. And that's a perfect tie-in to this next question for Ken. I mean, the Fountain House model is this idea of, shared ownership and peer support. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how your members create belonging within this model.
Well, it is absolutely at the core of what we do. So, the search committee that hired me had the former head of the National Institute of Mental Health and 3 people with serious mental illness on it. And I think that one does it not by dictating what happens, but by being deeply intentional in each and every step of what one does. So we're actually comprised of units. People choose it, whether it's the home and garden unit or the communications unit that publishes the weekly newspaper, the employment unit, the wellness unit. But all those activities are co-designed. And at the end of the day, especially for people with serious mental illness who've been treated as patients for almost all of their lives, to actually be seen as somebody who's a co-creator of how the community develops is enormously powerful. To give an example, we just opened up in Los Angeles and Hollywood. We were invited in by the county, and it's the first time that Los Angeles has any of these clubhouses. But our team, in the way that I think illustrates the importance, we have a clubhouse in the Bronx, actually flew out our members in the Bronx to start educating the members of Hollywood about what it meant to be a member of a clubhouse, not staff,
I love that.
members. And in fact, when the fires occurred in Los Angeles, because there were personal relationships, they were able to provide daily check-ins with our Hollywood members, some of them who had to be evacuated. And just think about that. The strength of relationship that it comes when you create it has all of these ripple effects that go so far beyond anything that would otherwise be done. And just as an additional point, though, to me, as I think about the ambitions we should have, it is actually to view this not as a nice to have, but as an essential to have. So one of the projects we're in the midst of is something called Measures That Matter, where we've asked our members, what should public funding be tied to in terms of the outcomes that people most want? And our members identified thriving, overcoming loneliness, overcoming isolation. And we're now starting to translate those into exactly what the outcomes are that public funding should drive toward. And it's such a powerful thought experiment to think of what we were paying for were for those outcomes as opposed to outputs of one kind or another. And so I think at its heart, I think you're so right that belonging is critical, and the intentionality that I think all 3 of us bring to it are essential at saying, not only is it possible, but it's the absence of judgment and the taking people where they are and just not leaving them there that's at the centerpiece of so much of what we try to do.
I feel like I'm writing down all these one-liners from Ken, like, just like you're like a poet, and I absolutely love it so much. I'm like, that's a quote, great soundbite. So but it's so, I think it's because it touches the heart so deeply, and what you keep on saying is, that I feel like in general that people should be seen as whole people that have a great deal to give to the communities that they're a part of, and that we shouldn't make assumptions that because someone is dealing with a severe mental illness that they cannot be contributors towards a positive society and towards a positive societal outcome for their own lives and for others. And so, deeply beautiful. I appreciate that. Mark, to you, I would love for you to kind of talk about how do those that are involved in kind of these tattoo performances or rhythm circles, how does it help veterans feel less alone to be part of something bigger than themselves?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because when you join the military, there is an absolute trust that goes across the entire service. And the US military is probably the greatest social experiment that's ever existed. It brings people in from every race, every background, every ethnicity, and it forces them to figure out how to be a team. And that's the survival. When you go to boot camp, you go to basic training, that basic level of trust is provided, and you have to figure it out. The hardest thing is when you exit the military, it's gone. So that sense of belonging, that sense of community, once you take the uniform off, there are some people that have a fantastic tradition. Most folks don't. And so the military has created these opportunities for transition, and they're really working on it. And the Department of Veterans Affairs, the installations across the country have really spent a lot of time, intentionality, and effort to try to, ease that pain. But some people succeed and some people don't. And so that's where we found in this peer-to-peer respect, veteran to veteran, and using music as a tool, there is absolutely this concept of heritage, belonging, and that's from anyone. We're talking folks that are coming from every immigrant status from the last 250 years of American existence. You can take the music from the Scots Irish, the Chinese, the Italians, the Puerto Ricans, the Cubans, the Africans, and if you look at the cultural music that comes from that ancestry, it is seen in every major city across the country. It's seen in Appalachia, it's seen in the Midwest. And so when you talk about this idea of belonging, we've been really trying to harness the identity of the veteran through military service. But then let's dive into your family's ancestry. Let's dive into those harder conversations where this is who you are. This is your blood. Yes, you serve, you all serve together. But when you take the uniform off, that doesn't mean you no longer belong. It gives you the opportunity to take service and then interact with this network of amazing musicians from all across the globe. And so creating the platform of the tattoo, we bring in pipes and drums, very Scottish. We bring in Irish dancers. Last year, we brought in North Carolina A&T. We brought in HBCU drum line to come in and perform with military drummers. We're talking with Native American groups that do powwows. And so when we look at what the structure of the tattoo is, it's really a canvas that we can bring people together using all of these cultural forms of music and heritage, and then wrap that up with military service. And so that's our North Star, honestly, to take Ken's term too, is how do we use these really deep cultural connections to make people feel like they belong.
All right, everybody. So this campaign is called hashtag I get it, as you all know. And sometimes those are the exact words I think that people are longing to hear. That's kind of been a through line in our conversation, not planned, but really just has come up naturally. So I'd love to give you each a chance to just share, what does I get it really mean to you? Is there a moment in your work when you stopped and you thought, oh, they got her, I got it, or it finally clicks, or you see someone else that says, "Oh, now I get it." Why don't we start with you, Ken?
Thanks. I mean, I think it's significant to me that I get the benefit and at times the challenge of being in day-to-day proximity with people who frequently have been marginalized for good portions of their lives and are in a process of recovery that is all premised, as we've talked about, on belonging and community. And I want to be clear, it's not that everything, is puppy and roses. There's plenty of tough times that I think everybody has, and that part of the value of proximity is not that it makes things easy, but that one can see what the power of the things we're talking about can come to the fore. So for me, the I get it moment is when I'm reminded of the power of watching resilience and transformation be taken up by community, belonging, and relationship. Whether that's somebody coming from the outside who has a vision of something entirely different. When you say you're going to be in a community of people with serious mental illness, and have them come out and say, that was inspiring, as opposed to that was difficult, to me is a touchstone that, particularly at this point in time, in our country, is so powerful to recognize that these are universal traits, and potentially they have something to teach us from those who are not listened to in the most common instance, and just are so powerful when that kind of support and platform is given.
Thank you, Ken. Mark.
So I grew up in New York originally. My parents are from the Bronx. My favorite grandfather died when I was 5 years old. I knew he was in the U.S. Army, fought in the Pacific, just to kind of also connect with Beth. But he was in the 27th Infantry, fought in Okinawa, Saipan, and that's all I kind of knew. Taught me how to throw a baseball, how to go fishing. Fast forward, I'm 11 years old. I get really into drumming and I started getting competitive. I had a drum teacher from Brooklyn, New York named Nick Antanasio. He was 75 when I was 11. So every lesson he would teach me about drumming was definitely like a Mr. Miyagi kind of Yoda moment. And he'd say, this thing that I'm showing you, you can't keep this. This is not yours to keep. It's only yours to give. And that never made any sense. So every decade would make more and more sense. And my father was also worked for New York State Mental Health for 35 years. He was the director of all of adult services for New York City when he retired. So I've been around this mental health space for quite a while. So Nick being this kind of guru for me, taught me. Fast forward, I graduate from high school and my mother hands me a pair of beat up old drumsticks. I said, oh, these must be from Nick. She goes, no, these are from your grandfather. And I said, wait, granddad was a drummer. And she hands me two photographs. One is him in the Pacific, probably 22 years old, completely disheveled, looking like he's beat to hell. The second photograph is from 1936, and he's in a cadet uniform with a snare drum across his chest. And it turns out he was in an American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps out of the South Bronx. And so I kind of looked at this and I went, wow, this is crazy. Granddad was a drummer. In everything that we're doing now at the Washington Tattoo, being good Irish Catholics, we never talk about our problems. I found out later on that the day he turned 65, he left the VA hospital in New York, stepped in front of a truck and killed himself. Completely planned. He had a note in his pocket that said, don't blame the driver. So he was struggling with this massive, massive mental health problem, huge alcoholic. And so when we talk about the programs we're doing with the Washington Tattoo, we have three programs. One is specifically for veteran mental health. Another one is for at-risk youth. But if we had these programs in the platform of the Washington Tattoo during that time that my grandfather was making that fateful decision, could I have ever played drums with my grandfather? And so the day that I put that all together was my I got it moment. And if I can save a brother, if we can save a nephew, niece, cousin, daughter, mother, sister, brother, I mean, every bit of this is worth it. So that's our mission till the day we die. And that's, grateful just to have the opportunity to share those stories.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for sharing. I think that when we tell those stories, more people than we hope actually can really relate to that. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. Um, and Beth, how about you close this out? What does I get it mean it to you?
I think I get it. Whenever I heard that that was the name of the campaign, I thought, wow, they get it. Like whoever came up with this idea to have an I Get It campaign, I was like, that means they really get it, because I get it goes two ways. One of them I think about is internally for that person. When I'm in a session and I see the light bulb go off for them and they're like, oh, I get it. Like, I get why I'm struggling with this. I see this in my lineage and my history. It's part of my DNA, or this is part of my backstory. Or when I'm in a couple session and they go, "Oh, I get it. I get what's going on here between us. I'm getting my spouse's or my partner's journey and story and why this has gotten complicated." When we're in a band session, we're in groups, anytime someone says, "Oh, I get it," for themselves or for someone that they're, walking life out with, it's a huge win. And I get to be on the front row seat. And I'm really not doing the work. I'm just holding safe space for them to be able to know it for themselves, right? The other piece of I get it is the community. It's whenever, and I spoke of it earlier in this women's group specifically, it's like when they can just walk into a room and say, okay, they just get it. They get it. And at Porter's Call, we would take a lot of pride in the fact that we have had 24 years of a brain trust of this very unique niche population, which are touring and recording music artists and their partners. And so if we've spent our thousands upon thousands of hours together collectively in the hundreds of thousands of hours with this population, I hope we get it. I hope that they experience that we get it. If we don't, I don't know what's happening, but that's what we're hearing is that they're like, you get it. And that means a lot. And so what then that opens the door to is belonging, it's community, it's healing, and it just continues to bloom from there.
Well, Beth, Ken, Mark, we really appreciate you. Thank you for joining us today on this conversation. And for those that are tuning in, we hope this conversation helped you to see the power of creativity, community, connection in a whole new way. We'll be back next Wednesday with an episode of the Impact Lounge series, Conversations That Connect Us. In the meantime, we invite you to take part in the I Get It movement that we're all a part of today. Make a post on social media, share how you'd like to reset or recharge, use the hashtag I Get It, and tag your favorite mental health nonprofit or resource. Along with a few friends you can invite to join in. Let's flood our feeds with reminders that support is out there and none of us are alone. And then for tools, resources, and to connect with today's featured organizations, please head to SixDegrees.org/I Get It to learn more. And until next time, remember, you're not alone and we get it.